Hi, welcome to Corrective exercise number 18 with FunctionFirst.com. I'm Anthony Carey, and I have Mayumi here with me, who's one of our team here at Function First. And what we're going to go over is the plank. The plank is a very common exercise used in the fitness industry and in the rehab field, but it's also an exercise that has a whole lot of mistakes that are done with it on a regular basis we see all the time. It's also one of the exercises in the pain-free program, in the graduate program. So we're going to have Mayumi go through the correct way to do it. Then we're going to point out some possible deviations of what we see, and then we're going to talk a little bit about a few of the progressions that we like to see people use that are obviously a little bit more challenging. So we're going to have Mayumi start down just on her elbows and her forearms, and as she's got her balls of the feet on the floor, you'll notice that what she's doing, she's got a good line from her shoulder to her hip to her knee to her ankle. Her cervical spine is neutral. She's not looking up, she's not looking down, she's keeping that control. We're about the bracing here with the abdominals because we want to resist hip extension by the buttocks dropping down. We want to maintain a good co-contraction through the abdominals and all the core muscles here so that we don't have an excessive lordosis that's occurring here. She's real good and neutral through her thoracic spine. So one of the things that we do to get people to start, I'm going to have Mayumi come back down all the way to the ground. And very often people aren't aware of how much flexion they're in their thoracic back. So sometimes what we'll cue them is we'll say, just relax through here even before they get up. And then they can feel their scapula kind of adduct, move towards the midline. And then we have them come up. And that helps to keep them out of too much flexion in the thoracic spine. So Mayumi's going to come back up into the start position. She's done a great job right through here where her scaps are. She's maintaining that good line. And she's got extension in the knees, not flexing the knees either, so that now most of the torque or the axis of rotation is both at the hip and the lumbar spine, and she's controlling that and making sure that gravity doesn't take over. So some of the common mistakes that we see, if Mayumi were to let her hips drop towards the floor, this is real common what we see, where they're not actually resisting the hip extension the way we should be, or the lumbar lordosis here, and this is way too much, not a great job. The other thing that we'll see is the buttocks going right up into the air where they're compensating because they can't control that axis at the hip and the low back. So if you want to come down and take a rest for a second. And then one of the other more common things that we'll see too is a person that's very dominant in their most superficial rectus abdominis, when they go into the plank, the first thing that you're going to see through them is a lot of increased flexion in the thoracic spine. So what they'll be doing is trying to pull that sternum towards the pubis. So we're going to have Mayumi go back up one more time. And as she kind of flexes through this upper back here, that's where she's really using more of the superficial abdominals versus distributing the work all through the obliques and even the transverse a little bit. There's no drawing in here, there's just the bracing that's happening. So come on down for a second. So some of the progressions that we can use for this exercise is once the person's up into the plank, we can always take one foot, one of the bases of support, one of the feet out, and we can extend the hip. Now what happens with that is we don't have just pure sagittal motion going at the hips and at the lumbar spine. Now we have the tendency for the pelvis to rotate toward the leg that's being lifted. So we're not only controlling that sagittal plane motion, but we've also got to control the transverse plane motions here, and of course a little bit of frontal plane because we're bouncing off the one foot and the same side shoulder as well as the other shoulder. So we're going to have you come on up, Mayumi. And what we're going to have her do is make sure she's all stable, which she's good. Now she's extended this hip, lost this base of support here, so there would be a natural tendency for this to drop. So now she's got to upregulate and work harder on the other side. We want to take this one step further. She's going to abduct this hip towards me a little bit, and that brings that center of gravity or center of mass away from her base of support and a greater tendency for that to rotate again. So take a rest. One of the other progressions that we can use is also taking what a person actually does wrong, some of the common mistakes, which is lowering and raising, and actually doing it dynamically, and therefore having that person control. So they come down and they'll eccentrically load through the hip flexors and abs and have them go back up. And now we make it a little bit more dynamic in the sagittal plane. But throughout the motion, the client or the athlete has to be aware of the ability of how much lordosis they're going to allow on the way down and how much they're going to come out of it when they come up. So we're going to have Mayumi get back up again, and now she's going to basically raise the hips and the buttocks up into there and then come back down, and now it becomes an eccentric control on the way down, or a deceleration. She loads it up again, and now she comes down. She's controlling it as she comes back down. Great job. Now we can always take a traditionally static exercise and progress it like we just did there with a little bit of motion. We can also take a traditionally static exercise and introduce a foundation or a platform that moves. So of course we're going to use the cortex. What else would we use at Function First? Mayumi's going to come over and she's going to get the forearms on here. So now instead of her just trying to keep the cortex still, as you would on another piece of device, she's going to drive it. She's going to create motion with her arms. So now the load throughout all these stabilizing muscles is consistently changing as she goes through, whether it's purely sagittal or purely frontal. She can write her name on there, whatever she wants to do. But now the load is continually adjusting, and the instability of her body becomes something that she has to react to on each and every move or shift in the change in the center of her pressure, of her feet to her arms and everything in between. Okay, you can take a rest. So check us out, www.functionfirst.com. Thanks for joining us for corrective exercise number 18.